welcome, gang. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Man Talk Central. I'm Colonel Esquire, and so, rule of thumb, if you see me opening up the show instead of RB3, the law-abiding citizen, that means that one or more of us is out of town or had other obligations that we couldn't avoid, so we couldn't make the call. But with that being said, we didn't want an empty week to go by without putting out any content. And so what we're going to do, hopefully, is that when we're not able to do a whole episode with the four of us, we'll have one or more of us do a couple of segments, choosing a topic at our discretion, based on what, some of you guys, the questions that you bring into us, we'll answer it. And this week, I'm up to bat. I'm up in the chute. So I'm going to talk about some of my experiences that I've seen with people in the courtroom with plea deals and what the difference is between a deferred sentence versus a suspended sentence. Some people ask me, hey, is it better to just take the fines based on the probation, requirements and conditions? And the short answer to that is it depends on your situation. I don't want to give any legal advice. Technically, I can't since I'm a prosecutor, but I'm just going to share my experiences. And, hopefully none of you all listening will be in that situation. But if you are at some point, maybe, the advice that I give, which is not legal advice, it's just my thoughts. Let me put that out there. That's that disclaimer. I'm just sharing my thoughts on a podcast. But with that being said, like, share, subscribe, follow us on social media, to check out the full episodes of Man Talk Central each week. Check out YouTube, check out Spotify. Some of the music's on Spotify. Look up Colonel Esquire. Appreciate your support there. And, look forward to being back with everybody in the next week or two. With that being said, thank you all. Let's go.
Okay, it's that time of the week. Let's get it. Indeed. Man talk, man talk, man talk, man talk, man talk central. That's what we're doing here. Four dudes out of the mud. Now we're ruling here. We give it to you. Deliver like Amazon. You're listening to Kings and Champions. No matter what we're talking about, we're gonna give it to you straight, man, no doubt. No doubt. Hey, yo, we on our way to greatness. God's got our back, so chill and relax. This is Man Talk Central. Welcome back to another episode of Man Talk Central. Let's get it.
Alright, so at this point in time, we're going to stop for a second to talk to Colonel Esquire with his legal segment. Ding, 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 ding.
Okay. Yeah, I guess this is something we're going to do periodically. We're going to stop and focus on topic of our discretion, our choosing. I think when we discussed it, I think it was whether or not a person should take probation versus just taking fines and costs or whatever the case is. But I'll just break down the probation system and how it works for the most part. So I get in trouble, for example. I'm driving, having a good time. Bing bong, New York's everything. I'm celebrating the championship. I get pulled over for a DUI, and life's so good, I blow up 3.8 or whatever. I wasn't drinking hen. I was drinking 93 octane. I get charged with a DUI. I go in front of the judge, what's called an arraignment, and that's where you're having your charges formally read to you for the first time in a court of law. If I'm, and they do it if I'm in custody, and depending on where you're at, they'll bring you over from the jailhouse to the courtroom to appear in front of the judge. Or, a lot of big cities, they do it virtual and they just have you appear on the screen. But if I paid bail or whatever, and I've had my attorney, or I don't get arrested that day, they just issue me a ticket to come to court, then I show up to court. And then at that time, if I don't have an attorney, the judge will ask me, how much time do I think I'll need to get an attorney? Usually they'll give you anywhere from 30 to 45 days. And you have to make considerable efforts to hire legal counsel. If you're in custody, they'll appoint you. A lot of times they'll appoint you an attorney. But if you make bail, then the judge is under the impression, well, if you had money to make bail, then you have money to hire an attorney. So we go through the process, and let me just make it clear. The legal system in and of itself, if you have dealt with the legal system, whether criminally or for civil matters, there's an old saying that the wheels of justice turn slowly. They do. And the justice system is really bogged down. 95% of all the cases in a criminal court of law never make it to trial. They get negotiated. Either they get dismissed, or most of the time there's some sort of plea agreement that people take. I'll never forget it. When I was making a decision, I knew I wanted to be out of law school. I had my mind set on becoming a defense attorney. But then a fellow colleague of mine, we went to school together. He was also retired military. He came out before I did, and he started working as a prosecutor. He was like, look, you're going to make a lot more changes being a part of the system versus trying to fight the system. And so one of the comments he said to me was, okay, well, I know what you're deciding to do, but if you make the choice to be a defense attorney, the best way you can be successful is to challenge everything and take everything to trial. And I was like, really? He goes, yeah. He said, because prosecuting offices, for the most part, are so overwhelmed with cases, and I'll get to that in a second, but they're so overwhelmed with cases that they're only going to try the cases that they know that they can win. The cases that they have all the evidence, they have all the witnesses, they're cooperating, they got everything in place. So if you, as a defense attorney, okay, I'm going to take Ephraim's case to trial. Let's put them on the trial docket. We'll see what we do. And if the prosecutor looks at you and says, okay, let's do it. And they're not wavering, they're not budging, and they start subpoenaing witnesses and start sending you all their lists of what they're going to do, then you better make a plea deal, because more than likely you're going to lose. Because the way the system is set up, yes, defendants have all kind of rights within the system. I do think that the system on its face is a fair judicial process. But if you're going to trial, it's set up for the defendant to lose, because the state or the government has all the resources, they have all the evidence, they have all the witnesses. If they lose, that's because their case wasn't very good to begin with. And so that's why my friend told me, if you become a defense attorney, challenge everything. So I always keep that in the back of my mind. And as a prosecutor right now, I do look at cases and I'm like, from start to finish, when I first read a report, can I take this to trial and win a case? If I can't do that, if there's holes in my case, I'm always going to be looking to set up a plea deal. I mean, plus, I'm a firm believer we're all one bad decision away from the penitentiary anyway. So I'm always looking forward to like giving people chances and rehabilitations, and that's why I like where I'm working at now. They're much more progressive as far as like trying to give people chances versus my first job. They was trying to lock everybody up. Like it was like, old chain gang out there. But anyway, I digress. So I said all that to lead up to this point. So again, going back to using me as a situation, I get a DWI, whatever, I get arraigned. You can have what's called a deferred sentence. A deferred sentence means that, okay, well, all right, Ephraim, the judge is going to, you're going to be sentenced to 2 years deferred. That means we're going to hold off on giving you a judgment until you do these 2 years of probation, all your drug and alcohol classes. And at the end of the 2 years, if you stayed out of trouble, you can have this case dismissed and expunged off your record, like it never showed up. All right, that's what a deferred sentence is. And so everybody on probation, the goal is to get some sort of deferred sentence to keep it off your record. Deferred. Keep it off your record. A suspended sentence is, okay, we're going to give you these 2 years suspended sentence. So suspended means this conviction is going to be on your record. It's going to stay there. But if you do your 2 years of probation and all your classes and you stay out of trouble, it'll just say suspended, and we won't actually put you in jail for those 2 years. So even though it's suspended and it's on my record, I still don't have to go to jail as long as I stay out of trouble. And depending on what it is, I mean, if it's a misdemeanor, you may not think that's big of a deal. Felonies is where you're going to have the issues as far as like trying to get jobs and background checks and all that, because that's on your record permanently. You know, most job applications still ask you if you've been convicted of a felony. You know, they're going to do a background check, so you have to say yes, or if not, you're going to be, you know, in more issues, right? So now the question is for people out there, well, do I just take the probation, or do I take fines, or do I just sit it out in jail? You know, and that all depends on who you are, right? I've seen the system is designed kind of for people to get stuck in this perpetual cycle. You know, if I'm a drunk and alcoholic and I get picked up for, you know, I don't know, fighting in a bar, you know, assault, you know, public intoxication, disorderly conduct, whatever the case is. Like, is it going to be cheaper for me to get probation versus just sitting in jail at $50, $60 a day, depending on where you're at, and paying it off that way? Or, you know, because depending on where you're at now, where I work at now with the Native American government, probation is cake. Anybody who doesn't take a sentence with probation is dumb, in my opinion, because probation is only $5 a month. You only got to check in. You know, you call in, you check in. You don't have to go do any drug testing or anything like that. It's kind of crazy. I hope they change it. I mean, to me, I'm like, man, even if I'm saying it's too lenient, it's too lenient. Versus the other side where I worked at in the county, if you got picked up and you got put on probation, even the charges that were not even drug related, you'd have to go test twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week at $16 a pop. All right. So you're spending $150 a month at least on drug and alcohol testing. You have to take your classes, drug and alcohol classes, depending on how drunk you were. You have to put an interlock device in your car. Depending on how violent you were, you got to go through batteries intervention program training. You got to go through all these counselings. You got to report in. You got to check in. Oh, and by the way, the system has got it set up to where I'm a prosecutor. If you get in trouble, part of your plea agreement is that you got to pay my office $40 a month for prosecution fees. So you got to pay the prosecutor that's trying to put you in jail. You're paying the probation officers that's waiting for you to mess up so they can write a motion to revoke your sentence and put you in jail. You know what I'm saying? Then you got to go through all your classes. Then you got to, if there's a victim involved, you got to make sure they're good with your sentence. All these things. So, you know, and most people are like, hey, can I sit it out? Because I'm not good. I'm not going to do well on probation. I don't have the money, you know, to drug test, you know, 2 or 3 times a week. Can I just sit this out? And some people do that, you know. It costs $50, $60 a day, depending on where you're at, to sit in jail versus, you know, spending $16 every time you go take a drug test and spending all this money. The average DUI, I'm in the wrong line of work. The average DUI costs anywhere from $7,000 to $12,000 to keep it off your record. You see what I'm saying? You know, you pay an attorney $35,000 to $5,000 up front. Interlock devices, you got to rent that. You can't keep the device. You got to rent it and then give it back. So it's all a scam. So, and I know I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole, but I would say to this: if you are a professional or you work in a place or an organization where background checks mean everything, or if you have a CDL or something like that, you definitely want to do what you can to have a deferred sentence, because you don't want anything on your record. If you're just a person, and I'm not disrespecting anyone, I'm just saying if you're working in a place or you're in a business or you're on your own business where it doesn't necessarily matter then I don't know, depending on what the charge is or what the crime is, I would probably either take the fines and costs or maybe sit it out. Because, depending on where you're at, in some places everybody's different. But I've seen the perpetual cycle of financial burden that people go through trying to pay this probation fees and get it off and keep it off their record. And they end up not keeping it off their record anyway. They end up seeing me. I can't tell you how many people I'll plea on probation. 3 months later, they back in the judge's courtroom because they violated their probation. Okay, Mr. Gibson, what do you want to do? This person violated probation. And then, I always want to give people a chance, but you can only give people so many chances to where the judge is like, you know what, forget it. We'll revoke the sentence. Forget it. We're going to do this, right? So it's very important that you understand that most court decisions are plea agreements. If you feel strongly about your case and that you're not guilty, traffic, yeah, I'd fight it. You know what I'm saying? You're going to sit in front of the judge, argue in front of the judge. The worst thing that's going to happen is you got to pay the traffic fine and keep it moving. But I'm talking about as far as like misdemeanors and felonies. If you feel that strongly about it, tell your lawyer to take it to trial. If there are holes in the case, more than likely a prosecutor's not going to mess with it. He's either going to dismiss it or give you some sort of deferred agreement you can live with, depending on what you did. But if that prosecutor is really adamant about going to trial, then maybe you should consider taking the plea. Because I know for me, in the interest of justice, but if I'm there, hey, I'm trying to get the conviction because that's what they pay me to do. And I'm the type of person, not everybody's like this, but I really feel strongly about it. If I'm taking you to trial, there is a problem because I'm not going to invest all of this time and resources into subpoena witnesses, getting police officers off work, talking to victims, getting medical examiner reports. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm a steward of the money that the government's giving me to use these resources. If I'm bringing all this together, I'm gunning for you. You know what I'm saying? And especially, I'm going to offer you something, pretty reasonable in the beginning. I'm going to look at the whole situation and then we're going to come up with a reasonable solution because I think everybody deserves opportunities to rehabilitate. I'm a firm believer that locking up people is not the answer. Sometimes it is an answer, but it's not the only answer. So if I'm taking you to trial, that's because one of two things. I feel strongly enough about the case where I know I can get a conviction, or my boss is like, hey, we need to try this case because the victim's pissed off. He or she is not going to want anything but a conviction. It's not a good case, but in order to keep our name out of the media and stuff, we got to try the case. That's the only time prosecutor's going to go to trial. So I know that's a lot to dissect and digest or whatever, but that's pretty much, a nutshell of plea agreements 101.
Thank you there, Colonel Esquire. Real quick, though, there's something you said, a keyword, expunge. And I know a lot of people have a misconception of what expunge really means. And what I mean by that is, the thought is if I have my record expunged, nobody can ever find out about it. But it doesn't hold true because if you apply for a federal job, expunge doesn't really hold up. Can you just speak to that real quick?
That is correct. And so expunged means that the technical term, it was removed from your record. But to your point, law-abiding citizen, that is not really true because it's only going to be expunged. It's only going to be hidden from certain levels of government. But with that being said, if you apply for a federal job, it will show up as if I apply for a job and I had a charge of assault and battery. I did my 2 years deferred probation. It was expunged and dismissed. They're going to see that it was dismissed and expunged, but yet it's still going to pop up that I was even in the courtroom. A lot of people think that, they're not even going to know I was even in the courtroom. Oh yeah, they're going to know, but they're just going to see that it worked out favorably in your decision. You know what I'm saying? Now, from a local county perspective, you can get it expunged where it will never show up. So, for example, if a person gets off probation and they successfully complete probation, the judge will say, "Well, congratulations, Mr. Gibson. Not too many people do this. You know, the attorney's signing your dismissal form right now. I'm going to sign it. When you get this form, take it to the court clerk, get 2 notarized copies, because this will be the only record that you're going to have of this case, because after that, it won't be in the system anymore. Because after they dismiss it and expunge it, when you call the county courthouse, they won't have any record of it. But to your point, RB3, the government always has copies of your records. The federal government.
Any questions? Any alibis out there? Any questions for the good Colonel Esquire?
Man Talk Central. That's what we're doing here. 4 dudes out of the mud. Now we're ruling here. We give it to you. Deliver like Amazon. You're listening to Kings and Champions.
So with that, let's go with closing remarks, starting with DJ Eddie T.
Well, today has been very knowledgeable for me, and I hope for you listeners as well. But as I always say, keep God first. You should have a great, safe weekend, great, safe week coming up. It's summertime, kids are out of school. Be careful out there, because, well, kids don't even go outside anymore, so never mind. So, kids stay inside, play PlayStation. When we were young, we were outside in the streets with our bikes, at the park, swimming pool, all that stuff. But anyway, all jokes aside, enjoy your week, enjoy your weekend.
Well, everybody out there, hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Treat everybody how you want to be treated, and hopefully we can all get along.
Colonel Esquire.
Oh man, keep God first. Stay humble. Have more to your steps. I still need to do a better job of that, but I digress. But everybody have a great week. Appreciate coming to you guys and girls for that matter and talking about things. We hope that it has given you some perspective. Thank you for watching, listening, however you digest the information. Man Talk Central.
As we close this episode, let's pause. Honoring the loved ones we lost, appreciating those who still walk beside us, and welcoming the new lives that remind us hope is always being renewed. Remember, our time isn't endless. We got more days behind us than ahead, so choose to make the ones you have left count. Lead with kindness, act with purpose, and whatever you do, do it with conviction. Make your impact, make it meaningful, and above all, make it yours. We thank each of you for your support. Continue to spread the seeds of love and respect. And until next time,